Like so many of us, my parents are aging. This raises important questions. What things need to be discussed and planned and considered when we look toward the inevitable decline and end of our lives? How should we process and cope with the impending onset of debility and senility, mental and physical decline, and death? These questions make us viscerally aware of the time limit under which we all operate. These questions are uncomfortable to contemplate because they confront us with our fears of loss, losing those we love, losing the abilities we take pride in, losing our place in our community, in our family, losing the very things that make us who we are. So we avoid these questions, we put them off, we deny, we say it'll be fine, I'll talk about it later, some technology will come up and we'll all live forever. And then we make the final situation worse because we have not considered it carefully. In our modern world, we have medicalized aging and dying, and not always with the best results. When is life no longer worth living? What can we do to put off losing our sense of meaning and connectedness as we age and die? Do I want life support? When wouldn't I want it? We don't have good models for these discussions, so I'm having them on air, recorded here with my own parents. I'm hoping to provide a model for conversations that you could have with your loved ones, ways of exploring this scary terrain, of shining a light into that final darkness. There are a few things I'd like to call your attention to as you watch. First, these are long conversations. They wander. They spread over my parents' histories and habits, foibles and worries. This is intentional and necessary because in that meandering, they reveal the depths of who they really are. It is impossible to contemplate every possible scenario of aging and dying, but by exploring their nature, their values, and what matters to them in the end, I hope that I will be able to make better decisions on their behalf when the time comes. This will be a long-running series. We are starting with a book review, Being Mortal, Medicine and What Matters in the End by Atul Gawande. We will move on to other resources, other ideas. Things will become more focused. Decisions will be made. But if you are in the same situation, do not try to rush through these discussions. As Tolkien says, not all those who wander are lost. There is no bullet point version of these conversations. Second, these conversations are emotional and personal. In my usual podcasts, I take pride in not cutting anything so that no one's views get misrepresented and nothing is hidden or slanted. Here, I will cut anything that reveals material that is too personal for my family. We could not have this conversation honestly if they were concerned that I would not edit out anything that they wished. Thus, these conversations will have cuts and jumps at times to protect their privacy. Third, these conversations are deeply intimate. Part of the reason we shy away from discussing death and aging is because it reveals too much. Death strips us all bare, and the process of dying can be deeply undignified. Our aging bodies are revealed by hospital gowns for access, our privacy is compromised by the need to provide us with care, our autonomy is sacrificed because of our inability to keep ourselves safe. This intimacy can be challenging for parents and children for many reasons. Parents are often trying to put up a brave front for their children, and children are often still clinging to the notion that their dad has all the answers. The intimacy of these conversations will destroy many of those illusions. But I hope witnessing these conversations will give you the courage to engage in the same long, scary, painful conversations with your own family. Death comes to us all, but how we meet it is up to us. Mom and Dad, and Creature of Darkness, that is my sister. So we got together, we wanted to talk about this book, Being Mortal, and so we picked the first 3 chapters, and just wanted to get deep on the notion of being mortal, how we die, what the process is towards the end of life. And that's something that I think he points out in the book. Not enough people talk about this honestly and openly. And Pappy, I think when you had your stroke, like that kind of got everybody's eyes open to some degree about, maybe we should talk about this. And thankfully no major effects there, but taking advantage of the signal, I suppose, to consider all that matters. Yeah, and I think the thing is too is like you weren't on any anti-platelet agents, rightfully so, probably at the time, and we added aspirin or whatever. And it's one of those things where you might die in 20 years of some other cancer, and it might be completely. There's no guarantees now that of anything, but at least taking advantage of the signal early. And that was something I think that kept coming up for me as I was reading is, hey, okay, these signals come up, but through the desire to avoid the subject, then we end up with worse decisions by default.
For
Default
Sari
decisions,
also,
kind of thing.
sorry to speak for you, but you have two uh, aging parents on your side, and they may not have read this Gawande book or have a desire to have these discussions, but it'll raise your awareness, right?
That's a lot of responsibility, actually, for you to have four aging parents all at once. But there you go.
So just this.
And an aging brother.
Yeah. Well, we shall ignore for the purposes of this conversation. But
Since you mentioned the stroke, I know you are a big believer in DNA and genetics, but my eldest brother, who people tell me I'm the most similar to, he had a stroke in age 87, and that led to his final days.
I mean, not just me, right? He even points out, I think, in the second chapter, right, that very small percentage of longevity related things are related to genetics, right? It's lifestyle, and lifestyle. Anyway, we can go through and I'll point out where I have some disagreements with some of his perspective. I think he has very much the standard medical perspective of people don't change, people don't do the work, and so. But I do think that outcomes can change quite a bit if people are willing to do the work.
I recently had a friend from childhood visit me. I might have mentioned him in the past, but anyway. So his family dynamics, same thing, and very very similar attitude towards his parents. So sorry, I missed my point. What I was leading to is that in many, even Gawande's own family. And in ours, in my father's family, my grandfather's family, it's the first time because of colonialism or whatever that people had property to pass on, and that it was the result of a lot of friction post passing on amongst the children. They had not planned, they had not thought about planning. Nobody knew why they had to plan. Compared to Mamaji, for example, who always had something to pass on. Previous generations. In my grandfather's time, that was the first one that he had something to pass on. So, and your generation is like going to Wall Street Journal will have the largest wealth transfer in history. I mean, trillions of dollars.
Okay, I'm still trying to connect it to this because there is sections here about how economics have changed to where all of this aging thing has kind of become different because both the children and the parents are well enough to have independent homes, well off enough. So that's also changed the dynamic completely of not being in a joint family system and lots of people living together and taking care of each other and the multi-generational thing. But can I just say that, like, just to keep us on track, that we should just share the book, like what we think about 8 chapters or something, each of us, and then how it affects us personally, all of us together, because otherwise we're going to be off on 17 tangents. First of all, I found the book incredibly readable. Second, because it's storytelling, and I love storytelling, and it's much better than reading some very deep, dense thing, which you guys are way more used to than I am. The other thing was that reading it definitely is scary. I found just that the inevitability of it, which even though we kind of know, we don't kind of know because we're not acknowledging that we're on a downward slope and the end is inevitable for everybody, but probably more for us than others. The third thing I got from the book was that no matter what the circumstances that all the people he was describing, whether this couple that was living in a nursing home or assisted living facility, plus people who were living on their own, the main desire was to be as independent as possible. And that they did not want to be in a caretaking type facility and extend life. So the quality of life was important. And only one person chose, remember in the beginning where he was like incontinent and had a problem and chose surgery even though it was not recommended. But he did that 8-hour surgery on him and the person died anyway. So I think that was what struck me. I've got the minute notes on it, but was that, okay, everybody wants to stay with by ourselves and or have family, children, preferably close by to take care of the things we can't take care of by ourselves. But the goal being that we really want to be as independent as possible. And that leads to a lot of other conversations other than exercise, which you've been pushing us for a long time, and lifestyle and all of that stuff, but also major changes is should we move now or should we do something? I don't know. Even that guy that was looking after his wife who was so sick, and then she was blind, and then she was deaf, he said he had purpose, even though it was so hard. He woke up in the morning and he had purpose, because then his purpose was to look after his wife. And even though after she died, he was lost because despite the fatigue, he just didn't have purpose. And I think that's the other thing is what is going to wake us up in the morning going forward the next 20 years, 30 years.
And that's, to me, oddly enough, I think that clarifies something that's important is I don't think independence as independence, like qua independence, is the goal, right? Because he was not independent from his wife. He would have been more independent if he just divorced her and let her deaf self be dying alone in a poorhouse, right? So he was not pursuing independence per se, right? Like he was pursuing purpose. And that's an important difference, because purpose is in a very real way a limitation of freedom. It's all the things by choosing a purpose, you are not doing other things, right? And so, yes, it is enough independence in order to pursue the purpose you want to pursue. That's important, right? But the purpose itself determines what that independence looks like. And so,
what do you
for
think,
me,
Sari?
I think that comes first.
What do you think? What did you feel about the book, baby?
No, we don't care about what she thinks.
Okay. You know, I like to be one step ahead of everybody else. So I read the first page of the 4th chapter, and the first thing it said was, "You'll be having a great old age life if you have a daughter." I have one of those. I have one of those.
Misreading of what it is. Very tendentious reading of what.
But anyway, I just thought I'd speak that. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
I mean, if you read the rest of that chapter, it tells you how miserable the daughter.
Terrible.
Letting you know. Spoiler alert.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
I will read past that one
Success.
paragraph. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah, I mean that doctor, like who was himself like a geriatric specialist, like clearly had purpose, but like the other, like Gwandi's grandmother-in-law, I guess, like I don't know if I read her as having like a purpose, except that like like what people want also is like home, right? Like people want to feel that they're at home. And I think what home means too is like whether or not my decisions are purposeful, they're mine. And if I want to eat Cheetos in bed and smoke cigarettes and get drunk and do all kinds of things that are terrible for me and never exercise, like I should have the right to do that. And I feel like the ability to do that is what helps people feel at home. Like if you're in your home and you don't get the right to do that, then that doesn't feel like home to people.
Thank you, Ron Swanson.
Yeah, but I mean, that's actually what I was about to say is like, that seems like a very like, that's part of the broader question of like independence and like, I don't know, it's a very like Western understanding of what it means to be at home. Cause like in my home, I can't do any of the things that I want to do on a daily basis. Like not like if I want to eat Cheetos right now, like good luck. Like I'm not going to be able to, you know what I mean? Like, and that's okay. That's part of like, it's part of being in a family. That's part of having people care for you. That's part of like, people are going to badger you if you want to eat Cheetos and your family is like, no, that's bad for you. So like you don't always get to do what you want to do. And I don't know if that's a function of age where you're just like, I have earned it at this point. So like nobody gets to tell me what I can and can't do. I don't know if that's a function of the society that we live in, that like like during COVID, like you can't tell me to mask because it'll help other people. I don't want to help other people. like this like almost breakdown of like social consideration, or like any consideration beyond what I myself want to do. Like the idea that every person should have unlimited rights and no responsibilities is kind of like baked into our, like, even with the idea of free speech, right? Like I should be able to say whatever the hell I want and there should not be any consequences for what I say. Like I feel like that's part of also some of the attitudes that we see toward aging. I should be able to do whatever I want and there shouldn't be consequences for what I'm doing. Like I should be able to get behind the wheel of a car, and if I accidentally kill 10 people, well, I had my freedom. Like, and I wasn't willing to give that up. So I don't know, like I do feel, obviously, like I agree with Mom, there was a lot that was very scary in the book. But I just also think there's some really unhealthy attitudes toward what people like should be able to do in life at any age. Like you are beholden to other people, even if that's your daughter who is gonna, like, again, this is jumping ahead to being in chapter 4, but like was running herself ragged trying to take care of her kids and her husband and her job and her aging parents. Like the aging parent also has a responsibility there to think not just about themselves, but about what does this mean for the rest of the family unit.
What's interesting is the notion of home, the notion of purpose, and the constraints they place on freedom are very intricately and inherently tied to the experience of purpose. I think that home almost contains a certain sense of purpose. Vervaeke, who I love, John Vervaeke, psychologist, talking about the psychological experience of meaning, discusses home as a place where you have a functioning, what he calls an agent arena relationship, right? So where basically he says a non-functioning agent arena relationship is a tennis player in a football stadium, right? It doesn't matter how good of a tennis player you are. All of your actions will be absurd and not make sense. There won't be there will not be meaning to your actions. Whereas you put that same tennis player in a tennis stadium and his actions have incredible meaning and because they make sense, right? And yet also there is to some degree the notion that a tennis court is defined by the actions that are taken there, and by the player participating in that. He's also because if there were no tennis players, there'd be no tennis courts, and so it's a mutually informing experience. The experience of home functions that way. Is that because I am a certain way, it is a certain way, and because it is a certain way, I am a certain way, and that mutually informing agent arena relationship that comes with both rights and responsibilities creates the experience of home in the sense of, hey, things make sense. That's actually one of the key characteristics of home, is that my way of being makes sense here. And yeah, the loss of home in that regard is extremely challenging. But you have to consider what your way of being is, what your responsibilities are, and you can't get rid of responsibilities and gain freedom. Because arguably, I mean, take y'all's example, Mom and Dad, y'all's example, like, okay, you move into some retirement home. Well, you're free of having to fix the house. You're free of having to, do these things. Well, no, you freed from responsibility into a worse situation. Now you're not home. Right? Because the responsibilities, as well as the rights, both mutually inform your connectedness to your life. And it's not even, I mean, we define it a little bit in terms of space, but it's not even in terms of space. It's in terms of the whether my being me makes sense here, right? And being me, I think, really is to some degree defined in terms of purpose. I would say Alice, his grandmother-in-law, had that purpose, right? That purpose of being Alice, right? And at the very least, that notion made sense. And then when you destroy too much around her, she's a tennis player in a football
for
stadium.
a long time. Her husband died very young,
Right.
and downhill real fast. But anyway. Jana, what's your take on the chapters?
No, it is. So, my take will be, it opened up a lot of, I'm really glad for this discussion because I can talk about the book and put in my points of view along with it where appropriate to pass on what we learned through our life. He talks in the first chapter, he's talking about Alice and Sitaram and the difference in their life. Sitaram is in India and he lives to 110 and he's telling running the household according to his wishes. Alice is obviously here and she has a certain amount of independence because she has finances. She has pension from her husband and whatnot. And that is key to me because previous to that, there were no pension, there was no old age security. And Sitaram's parents, older parents, they had 1 acre and they were indentured and they didn't have security. He made it happen and now he has security, now he has say so. And his security allows him to have that say so. And you can't build security at the last minute. You have to plan for it and make it happen at that point. And pension and social security help a lot. Believe me, help a lot because for most people, social security in America and a similar one in Canada allows older people to have some semblance of self-respect and control over their lives. Food, just simple thing as food, not being in the poorhouse or the whatever they call it at that time. So
Yeah, I mean, Pappy, you make a great point. I think with the notion that I finally understand after you had me why you continued having children so that you could have a daughter and have that security built in. Because you knew that having as a son, it just wasn't going to,
absolutely.
it's like,
I mean,
okay,
that was
we
a
got to
very
have another
conscious
one.
decision on
You
my
know?
part. Like the first 5 years, I knew I was in a downward slope right there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's just it was just part of the 401k. It was just like, just son, this is not going to work. We need a daughter.
I mean, the difference, just to Dad's point about that, just in our recent life, the way Ammi and Appa aged, my parents, as opposed to us. I mean, I did run a little ragged with them, but a lot of the frustration did have to do with the fact that they were not financially secure and they could not take care of themselves in that sense. Sure. And yes, we could have made better choices. All of us could have made better choices. But I think that was a big part of it, was the constant fear of, in fact, Dad was telling me, and I didn't even know this, that Abba had told Maria at some point that I think I'm going to live for 5 more years because after that I'm going to run out of money and then I'm going to want to die. Now, he never shared that with us. Because, and I told him 50 million times that money is not an issue here. But still, he felt it. I get it. But he told Maria that and he shared it with her, that he felt like he had enough money for 5 more years.
Yeah, I mean, there's been those couple of cases in Canada that have made headlines of people choosing like medically, MAID, whatever it stands for.
So, medically assisted euthanasia, basically.
Yeah, basically, because they couldn't afford to stay.
That's what Alice does. I mean, she vomits blood and doesn't call anybody, right? So, she's doing.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's I don't want to get too far into this topic, but I think that's the case for medically assisted euthanasia on some level. Is otherwise we're just waiting for some illness to hit so that then we have a justifiable reason to not treat it, right? Which is an odd, a greater suffering sort of pathway. Is that like, well, if I vomit blood, then I won't call anyone, but I have to sit here waiting until something goes bad, right? Yeah. And so, anyway, that maybe is a different direction.
To modern society. In Scandinavian countries, people are allowed to do that, right? So.
But also, like, I'm curious, again, for me being in this like sandwich generation, because the generations after us are not able to afford to live on their own. Like Gideon, for example, would like to move out, but like, where is she going? Like, everything is so expensive. And so obviously we don't know what her earning potential is eventually going to be, but like even millennials, Gen Z, they're moving out a lot later. they're not able to establish the same kind of wealth. Like things are not as in reach for people financially. And so I'm wondering if that means that like those of us in the middle of the economic, right before things got really bad, does that mean we're going to be even more financially crunched because we're going to be taking care of kids and elders, like adult kids and elders at the same time? Or is that just like a return to the joint family system? And because kids can't really afford to move out, maybe it's a good thing. Like we're back in, well, we're going to pool our resources. I mean, even for us, like half the reason we've been able to be as well off as we have is because we're living with Dadi and Babaji and the house was already paid off. And nobody just walks into a prepaid house and like, here you go. Like you, like for Hardeep even, like he didn't really start earning till he was in his 40s, but because we don't have the financial burden, the huge financial burden of the house, has been a huge leg up. But I'm wondering what it looks like going forward in terms of, I don't know like if the same thing is going to be true, that like the next generation being in good shape financially helps the previous generation.
I mean, that's kind of linked directly with what Pappy was saying in terms of the delayed wealth transfer. Is like the money has not changed hands as it should have historically by this age of children. And not to put too fine a point on it, but the parents should be dead and the money should be in the hands of the next generation.
That's what happened to Sitaram, right?
Right? It's still in.
I mean,
his uncle, and then that's why they had a fight and he left for 2 months.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of the thing, right? And the same thing will happen to Gen Z is as the millennials hoard the money for their retirement and old age, it won't transfer again, right? And so, oddly enough, this is sort of a bit of a problem of having a success in more widespread aging. And one of the points that I make often with the people who are like very pro longevity, right? Say, oh, you can live forever. We can live to 200. It's like, what are you going to do? Like, what are we going to do if everybody starts living till 200, right? We can barely handle people living till 80. It's not going well, right? And so, yeah, it does raise, I think you're right, all of these questions. Anyway, yeah, I will say, I think just jumping in from my takeaways to some degree, reminded me a lot of, well, okay, obviously I've been watching quite a bit of Vervaeke, and he's very heavily on purpose, very heavily on the notion of meaning, home, those kinds of experiences psychologically. So obviously that's always quite forward in my mind. He talks about sort of or he reframes sort of the Buddhist four ennobling truths, or four noble truths. He reframes them as four ennobling provocations. And as I was reading this, I was struck by sort of the notion of types of foolishness, which is the opposite of ennobling provocations. It's denial is a form of foolishness, where we say, well, we're not getting older, right? And we can live forever. The longevity kind of foolishness is, oh, well, we don't have to really think about what we're going to do in old age. We'll just live forever, right? And even in our 40s, we do that. We say, well, medicine will save us. Well, I don't really have to think about it. Money will come, whatever the deal is, right? So that denial, I think, is part of it. And then when things start to go bad, oh, well, no, I can still see. I can still hear well enough. I can still, right? And how that ties into our self-definition, right? I'm a good driver. So many people said in the book, I'm a good driver, right? It's a definition of self. And at some point, that's not true anymore. But at what point, right? And we often aren't willing to give up that definition of self until something bad has happened, right? So until Alice drives into the neighbor's yard and wrecks into their bushes, she's not willing to say, I'm not a good driver anymore, right? And that's a hard thing. The second foolishness that came up for me was avoiding discomfort. And that, you guys know, that's always a thing with me, right? But so much of these things is, well, that's an uncomfortable conversation. That's what we're doing here, right? Oh, that's exercise is uncomfortable. That medical treatment is uncomfortable, right? And then going back to denial, like, well, I don't want to know. I don't want to know what I don't want to look at the weight on the scale. I don't want to look at the lab tests. I don't want to go to the doctor because I don't want to know, right? Well, okay, now you're living in denial, and you're unable to make good choices because you're not really confronting reality. And then the third one, at least, and I didn't get to four, so I fell short of Buddha, but is the notion of pride, is that if I do this, it means this. If I wear a life alert, then it means that I'm frail, right? If I take insulin, it means I'm really diabetic. If I, whatever, it's these notions of like, and there's fear in that, like the fear of like being treated differently is, oh, my family will see me as old and treat me as if I'm frail, if I whatever, right? But that notion of pride, then you won't wear the life alert, and then something catastrophic can happen that could have been prevented, right? Life alert is just an example, but whatever the deal is, that notion of saying, well, before something happens, let's adopt other things to say, okay, well, we can, like a seatbelt. That's the classic thing in younger age, right? Is teenagers won't wear seatbelts. And it's like, well, nothing's going to happen. Well, no, probably not. But if it does, it's catastrophic. So how about we wrinkle your clothes a little bit, right? And that's the notion here in old age as well, is there are all these seatbelts that you can only get to if you really confront with open eyes, which hopefully this book is doing, the process of aging, the nature of aging, and what you want that to look like. And again, like I think he points out very well, the medicalization of things has done a disservice in some ways. I think, no, like I've talked about this even with some of my older physician colleagues who've been practicing for longer, and they have a different view. They have a much more, I think I've learned a lot from some of the older physicians who are like, yeah, you know what, if he wants a beer, let him have a beer. Like we can't anymore because it's against hospital policy, but he's had a beer every day of his life. He's 90. Like what? And even in terms of like medical, like somebody comes in and they're 90, there's like their family history. What family history? Like they've outlived everyone in their family. No family history is possibly relevant at this point. If his father had a heart attack at age 50 and he's 90, like what who cares, right? And so the same is true of medication to some degree. Is like, should we, he said, like what are the top 4 risk factors for falls? And falls can be fatal, right?
Yeah.
Is being on more than 4 medications. And so being on 4 medications, muscle weakness, right? Like, hey, we got
isolation.
And isolation. We got to have those things, right? And so
I got 4.
yeah, I do think well, and I think the notion too, I mean, okay, and to be fair, there is, I think there are differences between different types of medications to some degree, but so many, I mean, I think even comparing, just to get personal, like mom and dad, your sets of medications, being on 4 diabetic medications is one thing, right? Being on medications, 2 of which are opiates and benzos, is a different thing, right? Yeah. The risk profile of those is just different. And so just being aware that, okay, hey, there's a risk here that we have to confront openly. And we have to say, and that's not a control. That's not like the only answer is to get off the medications. It's like, no, well, maybe I can't get off the medications, but I better get on my social connectedness. Yeah. I better get on it with the muscle strength, because I've already got 1 out of 3 that I'm stuck with. So I better shore up the others. Right. And so that, I do think that those things
I'm ready to get on the
are
Ashton protocol to switch from lorazepam to, even though I just reduce the dosage, that'd be good enough. I can go to.
I mean, I've had great luck with Ashton. I really have. I mean, like it's such an undervalued. I was never taught Ashton, and that's a great example. I was never taught the Ashton protocol. It's a benzo withdrawal protocol. I was never taught the Ashton protocol in residency ever. And in practice, I've had great luck with it, right? And part of the reason that they don't teach it is it's very long term. Very long term. I've got a patient who was on 1 milligram of clonazepam 4 times a day, and that's 40. The first step of the Ashton protocol is switching to Valium because it's longer acting, right? And because it can be divided smaller. So that's 40 milligrams of Valium per day. And now, a year and a half later, he's down to 14 milligrams, right? And so, and he's a young man, so that then it's going to be even longer at age, right? But it's the willingness to take. It's the same to me. It's the same thing as being in the gym, and I've told him this. is it's like, hey, you want to gain muscle? Great. That's a 3 to 5 year process. You can do it. You absolutely can do it, but it's a 3 to 5 year process. And it's got ups and downs, just like that death chart he showed, right? The way we die. The same is true going up, right? Improving health has the exact same kind of like setbacks and recoveries, and that's where I disagree with him to some degree. Is that
recently, right? And even part of that PT, he's saying, "Oh gosh, we're making such good progress." That's bad.
Yeah, and I mean that's but I think we only get surprised by that because we're unfamiliar with it. Every single athlete who has ever worked at an Olympic level has had setbacks, big time, big injuries, setbacks happen. It's part of the game. Like if you're pushing into growth, you're gonna have setbacks. That's part of the game.
Part of the aging process
it's
that
not expected. You're never gonna.
Is that how much longer it takes to recover?
Absolutely. I'm not saying it's the same setback as when you're younger, right? But again, you can only do what's in front of you. That to me is, again, denial. It's like, well, you're not 20. You shouldn't be working out like you're 20. You're not going to recover like you're 20. And so, yes, you need to have a 20-year-old guy who's trying to get strong, I give very different advice in terms of like how far they should push into injury. Because even if they rip the tendon off the bone, we'll staple it back. They'll be fine within a year. Like, it's fine. Like, whereas even my age, I'm 40, like if I rip the tendon off the bone, it's probably not going to really get back to where it was, right? It's going to be very hard, very long to get it. I'll get it functional again. Like they'll go in, they'll repair it surgically, X, Y, and Z. But there's going to be something lingering there forever, right? So the cost of a severe injury is higher. So I need to ideally push differently. But I also can't be so afraid of injury that I just stop going to the gym. Right. And I think that's what happens is so often we're so afraid of the setback that we stop going to the gym, or we stop pushing in the gym. And then you can go to the gym and just lift 5 pounds and say, oh, I went to the gym. But if you're not working, you're also not going to be gaining. And that's the challenge. And
that's an interesting
that blend of fear and aggressiveness is
process
challenging.
Downwards is also the hilly process upwards. So it's the same exact graph, it's just going in the different direction. When I was thinking about this, and I talked to a couple of my cousins, and of course they're in complete denial because they're like, why are you worried, Bin Fateh? This is nothing to do with anything. We are all here. Unless that. So it kind of gave me a same thing about have faith, but tether your camel. And where does that all go? So there are elders in our family that seem to be, and I'm not talking about their physical selves, but they seem to be at peace with the whole idea that, okay, they're going to die. They don't seem to have a lot of fear. I'm talking about Masinati Samasilo, all these people. They just sort of like, we're here. And you said when we were deciding to take Abba off the respirator and stuff, that he has faith and he wants to be in a better place. So prolonging his life here is not a good choice for Abba because he is mentally totally okay with going to God and he's okay with that. So there's a real component of that in this whole process, which is, I mean, to me, I have some clarity in the way I think, is the have faith part and then tether your camel part. And the tether your camel part has got to do with do the exercises, try to get off of crazy meds, do the diet, lifestyle restrictions, get socially connected, all of those things that we have to work on. And I also have to work on really the faith piece, which I don't think I'm as good at as probably Sari is. And I've learned a lot from her and from Nuri. I'm surrounded by people who have faith, but in different ways. I mean, and I don't know that faith is my faith, but still, it's something to work on because I feel that the people who I observe, I just feel like they're so much at peace with things. And I know that it's connected somehow to the faith they have. So I'd like to work on that spiritual muscle along with the physical muscle because I feel that the combination is what I need personally. and I have setbacks, and I'm very lucky to have you as my children, because I can bounce a lot of things off. Like, I mean, I'm going to acupuncture and all of a sudden I'm incredibly sore. I just can't move my legs. I can't, I mean, it's like carrying 20-pound weights on my legs. And I talked to Tasneem about it, and she said that whatever, release of toxins, hydrate more, let all that stuff out. We shouldn't be sticking needles all over. So, okay, I hope that's a temporary thing. There's also this pride. Too many visits to the doctors. I'm like, go to the foot doctor every 4 months, go to the internal medicine doctor every 3 months, go to the acupuncture doctor, go to the this. It's like, what the heck? I mean, my whole life has changed dramatically. And then I think how lucky I am that I have access to good medical care, good advice from you that I can run off with always running, that sort of thing. And now I'd like to go ahead and have that faith piece, which I'm sure Sarah and I can talk about a lot. Because I think the combination is really what's going to be, I mean, you know how I am, outcomes oriented. You're telling me not to be, but I always like to see what action can I do now that's going to have a good outcome for me. I mean, so in this regard, with the book, I'm like, okay, we want to stay home. We want to stay and enjoy the life we have as much as we can. What can we do to make that happen? And to me, one of my biggest fears is to be a burden to my children. I don't want to be a burden to my children. I want. Well, I know
Well,
that.
you're already
I
too
really
late for
do
that,
know
no?
that. But I'd like it to stop here and not be any worse than it is already. But it's financially, especially because you don't need that, but also in other ways. And I'm glad we have a place to go in the summers, because one thing I noticed was the purge of being an only child. I mean, there's nobody to take that off. And then I noticed how Mami Rashida and them handled it. The sisters always, oh yeah, we're going to blah, blah, blah for 3 months. Then some other sister would come automatically and say, okay, it's my turn. I'm going to take care of the oldies and you guys go do whatever you have to do. So I didn't have that. And now I'm glad I do.
Here's the you mentioned you mentioned Abba and faith and those kinds of things. I think also what's interesting. Overall, again, there's exceptions in everything, right? But they say 95% of healthcare dollars are spent in the last 6 months of life, right? And the exception to that is doctors and nurses, typically, right? Overall, doctors and nurses don't do that because they do what I did with Abba. Like, if I wasn't there in that way and had the medical training,
I know.
we could have pulled him out. We could have said, okay, you know what? Put a trach in, put a feeding tube in. We'll keep him on the ventilator for another 2-3 weeks. Let his lungs heal up. He'll wake up. He will have lost massive amount of muscle mass. He'll go to a nursing home. He'll do some PT. He'll barely be able to sit in a wheelchair. Then he'll get another pneumonia. And then, and so then that hill is happening. Whereas I kind of here, I'm like, I'm out. And that's what doctors and nurses tend to do because it's a very hardcore sort of real. We don't do the third round of chemo for cancer. We know better. The third round of chemo doesn't do anything for anybody, right? And so we just cut out and we're like, cool, it's hospice time. I'm out, right? And so that notion of, hey, when you're having these hills, there is usually multiple opportunities on one of those dips to say I'm facing the reality of the situation. And that's where ideally, like, the notion of faith can allow you to confront that moment with sufficient fearlessness to make that decision, right? I'm not as much a believer as you guys in a lot of ways, or at least the structure of my belief is relatively different. But I do think that the core notion of sufficient fearlessness to face reality truthfully, again, staying out of denial, to say, yeah, I am going to die. That's the reality. And I'm not putting it out of my mind. And then you can work your way towards peace, right? When it stays there in the back of your head and you're not willing to think about it, you're always going to be anxious because you should be thinking about it, but you're not, right? And that's just going to keep grating at you, right? Until you turn around, bite the bullet and say, yeah, I'm going to die.
But I like that.
Now what do I want to do?
And I like that, Mom, you're saying, like, I feel like when a lot of people say have faith and tether your camel. I think colloquially what that means is the have faith part is just forget about that part and control what you can control. But I like that you're specifically articulating that the have faith part is also an action item. It's also work. It's also something you have to cultivate and put time into. It's not just, yeah, okay, I have faith, and so I'm just leaving that alone over there and I'm working on these other things. But I think if that's how you're sort of conceptualizing how to navigate this part of life or any part of life, then yeah, the faith part takes work. It takes time investments. It's what are you going to do today to cultivate that? And it's a very
I mean, the Hamas that went out the window when I went to Canada, it's back. I did pray this morning. I prayed last night, and it's just like we're doing this, right? You can't just, but it's a deliberate thing to say, no, if I do this often enough and I understand what I'm doing and I be conscious about it and I'm not. So yes, it is, but it takes effort. It takes effort to cultivate that part of it. And I think it's important.
Yeah.
And I've always, sorry, go ahead, Tucker.
I've been remiss in letting you guys know as you were growing what my belief system was, because it was Amina Brai and mom there. And so I've always had trouble with the entire Abrahamic faith system from a long time, because because of Jean Lapart Sartre's influence being in nothingness. And when I was growing up, that was a big deal. So existentialism and all that influenced me quite a bit, and Albert Camus. So today, I would say I'm a cultural Muslim. I do all these things because what else will I do? This is what I know. I don't want to learn some third decision. And I do perceive the benefit of doing it because it's familiar. But I don't derive as much as your mom does. It doesn't, when I'm praying, my mind wanders around. I can't. So
well, mine does as well. But again, it's like you have to bring it back and you have to say, okay, why am I thinking of whatever? And say, okay, no, I'm going to. And then that's when I start saying it out loud because it's really hard to fool around. But you feel better when you do namaz too.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things that like, no one is saying that your faith has to look like anyone else's. So it's obviously, but like, I'll just like, I think just building a mom saying like I think it's a misnomer that the point of faith is comfort. Like I think that's some of what I get from faith, but it's also, I guess, to bring it back to our conversation, it's less about comfort and more about like purpose for me. Like why were we created? Why are we on this earth? Right? And my answer for that is, of the two reasons, at least from my understanding of the Quran, is that one of those reasons is to worship God, and that's also that there are benefits for it that aren't immediate. There are benefits for it that you can't always see. There are benefits, like it's extremely uncomfortable actually to pray Mass 5 times a day when you live in Edmonton and Isha is at 11:30 and Fajr is at 3 a.m. Like that is not about comfort, and those aren't like really beautiful, fulfilling. Like I was just joking with my Quran teacher, like the fulfilling prayers in the summer are the afternoon prayers, because the nighttime, like Maghrib, Isha, Fajr, I'm just trying to get through it and go to bed. So, but like it does still matter that you do it, and I guess that's where the action has to come before the faith, is like you have to believe that has a purpose. But I mean, I guess you could apply that to anything, like exercise. Like if it's a 3 to 5 year process to build muscle, you have to go to the gym, whether you feel like it or not, whether you see any immediate benefit from it, whether it feels good to go to the gym or not. Like, and sometimes it will. Sometimes you'll go to the gym and you'll feel like, oh, that was such a good session. I've got the exercise high. Like I'm still waiting on that today. But... Yeah. And other times you're just going to be like, I don't want to go. And you're going to get there and you get through the whole thing and you're like, that sucked. I still ate it. I still didn't want to be there, but you did it. You know what I mean? So I feel like so much of life is just doing things you don't want to do. And
for the purpose, right?
Right.
In order
Yeah.
to fulfill the purpose that it serves, right? Like, I don't love going to the gym. I've never loved going to the gym. I don't like it. I still don't like it. Given my choice, I'd be sitting on the couch eating donuts, right? Like 24/7. And that's why I was joke with Pat, like I've told them, it's like, people always say, oh, listen to your body. I'm like, no.
Mine
My
too.
body tells me to sit on the sofa and eat donuts. That is its only message 24/7. It is not a trustworthy thing to listen to. Like, you can't, right? Because it's always the same message. And so doing CrossFit, working out in the gym, doing all these is always going to be not really what I want to do. There's better and worse, and you can make choices, but I want the outcome sufficiently to do it anyway.
I
right?
was
Like,
bring a story into my family. My mom's dad was a mullah, and that mosque is still in existence. And last time I went to pray there also. My point is that, and this is somewhere in the Islamic study. Islamic study was compulsory for us in Pakistan. So somewhere in there, Surya Pak said that, okay, God doesn't need your prayers. I'm summarizing, forgive me if I missed something, but he's saying he's got all the makhlukat, the angels and the this and that, praying for him. So he's not waiting for your prayer. You need your prayers. And I agree with that. I pray for myself.
Mhm.
In praying, I get physical exercise, get up and down 5 times a day, several rakats, all the rakats. They are building my muscle, my neck movement, all these things. So for me, and even just focusing the yoga thing, so I combine all of those things in my mind. To me, I'm praying for myself very much. And if God is listening to it, that's the side benefit.
But I'm
I
wondering,
will say,
like, if
go
you
ahead.
feel like, and I'm thinking also about my in-laws, like, do you, and even the examples from the book, like, the idea that life is about doing things that you don't want to do because they're good for you or because they're good for the family or because they're good for society. Do you feel like that gets harder? Like, old people just have a harder time being like, I need to do this, so I'm going to do it whether I want to or not. Like, is it just like fatigue? Is it feeling like I've earned the right to do whatever I want regardless? Like, because I struggle a lot with like my in-laws too. Like, they know what they're supposed to do, and they're constantly going to the doctor and be like, "What should I do?" And it's like the same thing I told you to do last time that you're still not doing. Like, and like, so partly it's like I think for them it's like a cultural expectation what the doctor is going to do for them, but like, is there a point at which your acceptance of just having to do the thing, like your tolerance for that, decreases? Do you think that's going to decrease?
It's a question of how much deep is your faith. Again, Masa Khosem and Masi Nafisa. Totally, he's 92 and he goes there and he's going to Ashura also. But their belief is so unquestioned that they must be deriving somewhere. And they have the social interaction part too over there and being a part of the community. So in that sense, Mom says, I'm the only child. In that sense, my life, my choices made me essentially an only child also because I didn't have siblings around me. I grew up alone. And
So, as to your question about why it's harder, at least for me, that is part of it. And I get a little teary when I think about me saying, I have worked so hard all my life, which is true and unappreciated by my father. She said, I just want to be pampered. That's exactly what she said. Now, the thing what I told her was, it chose the wrong society and the wrong household in which to do that because we can't do that. I mean, how are you going to be pampered? I mean, that means I have to quit my job, take you around, do things with you, talk to you, be your social thing. It's just not possible. Now, a little bit of that is also mine. I mean, there's part of that just struggle fatigue, but like Zane's he's such a pusher. Just like, so what? I mean, you have to struggle. I mean, struggle is not a bad thing. Just struggle, absolutely. Struggle and keep aiming. I remember when Ammi could barely cook for herself.
Hey, we can get this video banned from YouTube. I'll just jihad.
jihad.
No, I remember when I said Ammi doesn't even want to cook for herself. She's just having. So Zane said, "Tell her that 30 people are coming over and she's going to have to cook for everybody." So you just aim so ridiculously high that the person, if they have to cook for 10 people, it seems easy because they were supposed to be cooking for 30. So I think it's part of that struggle that I have to internalize, that it's good. It's good to struggle. And I'm very
think that, like,
I'm very torn about even going back to work,
sorry,
for
go ahead.
example.
Finish the
But
thought.
I know
Yeah.
that the not going back to work has to do with laziness. I'm taking on mental laziness, physical laziness. I'm taking on challenge. I don't want to TA this pelvic floor course in September. I'm a little nervous about it. I haven't taught in a long time. But when Herman Wallace called me last week, I said, yes, I'll do it. Because now I have to fight. I have to get up. I have to start doing all that stupid stuff and reading anatomy all over again. So I am deliberately taking on things that I really, I'm like, why? Just watch TV, eat bonbons, just forget it. I told Dad I want to start the Libre. Again, there are phases of being an ostrich with age for me. There are times I'm like, yes, I want to know what is my blood sugar. I want to know this. I want to know everything. And there are times when I'm tired, which I have been this past month. I've been really struggling. I'm like, I don't want to know. I don't want to put the Libre on. Sure. I don't care if it's this blood sugar 700. I just don't care. I don't want to know. And then I'll just call Zane and he'll fix it. But that's different.
Sure.
So, but I told Dad yesterday, I said, I want to put the Libre on today because I'm getting out of that. I'm getting out. I went to the foot doctor. I went to the acupuncturist. I went to, okay, insomnia is a problem. Take care of it. The feet are a problem. Take care of it. I mean, I am, and I have to get really motivated about doing the weights, which I'm not. I'll get back. Go ahead.
I will say, I think sorry, I just wanted to jump in. I think this area that a lot of what I see is that so much of even our younger life is subconsciously motivated by comfort seeking. It's the notion, well, I want to work hard now so that I'm comfortable in my old age, so that I can do the things I want to do, so I can sit around being retired. Right. I think in some ways retirement is a bit of a poisonous concept,
yes,
and he talks about how that concept even came up, right? But but this notion that, like, and then when you get to old age, you're like, well, no, I was expecting at least now to be comfortable and to sit around and do nothing, rather than having the view, no, I'm going to work up until the moment I drop dead. Maybe not work for money, maybe I'm just working taking care of my partner, maybe I'm just working volunteering, maybe I'm just working on my own health, but there's not, you don't get to stop. You stop when you die, right? And even if you can barely, I mean, there's so many examples of people, and that was, again, like, very recently there was a guy who made a pretty significant contribution in physics in his 90s. And he's still contributing to stuff. And this guy is still teaching geriatric in the book. Yeah. He's still teaching geriatrics to people. He's still, and that notion that, like, no, just keep pushing. There isn't if you let go of the notion that there's ever a moment to stop.
I totally agree with that.
That just doesn't exist, right?
Bring it to our reality, our present. I'll be 75 in September.
Yeah,
with the recent event, and that's what triggered this whole discussion. But, okay, what happens? What do we do if my stroke is disabling? I don't have an answer. What happens if the memory is totally gone? That probability is low, but, I mean, you can't rule certain things out. So I don't have answers for those two questions. Those are two that we addressed in chapter 1. What happens? Health and memory are lost.
Well...
Mm-hmm. And I think my answer to that is, like, well, what are you doing that would, I mean, Christopher Reeves is a great example. He's young guy, actor. He's paralyzed at a young age, right? But found purpose. And it's a very similar thing. It's like, well, what are you doing now that would be worth doing disabled? And if it's nothing, then that's a problem. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of things where it's like, you know what, like, even disabled, there are certain things I would want to, I wouldn't be happy about it. But I've thought about this. Like, if I lost my vision or lost my sight or lost my ability, my strength, like, I would still, there's still ideas for my practice that I'm like, no, nobody else has these ideas. I need to get these out before I die, right? Before I go, somebody needs to have, I need to figure out who's going to pick up this work to carry it on. right? I need to get these ideas out because they're important. And so that would sustain me at least for a while, right? And so there's this notion of like, well,
I think
what could you anyway?
dead on. I think I need to tell my stories, their family stories, but also their humanity stories. And
That's why I feel like it's one thing that happens with age, and I've never been one to run from a challenge that way, is you're constantly picking on the low hanging fruit. I think that's also true of Pa, probably true of me as well. Is when I'll just clean the kitchen because it looks like it needs cleaning. So, well, you'll just go ahead and sweep and mop and do your thing. And then you say, okay, well, see, I had some purpose today. Well, what I really need to be doing is something of a much higher level of that needs a lot more muscle, both spiritual, physical, and everything else. But that's just too hard. So you tend to kind of clutter up your life with these easy things. And maybe what we need to do is to probably have a conversation about what, and I guess I need help with this because I felt like I had purpose all the way up until I retired, I think. I mean, I woke up in the morning and I knew this was going to happen. And even if the whole purpose was that I was going to fight with the C-suite, and that was my purpose. I was going to fight with the C-suite. The CEOs are wrong. The CFOs are wrong. The COOs are wrong. They're all crazy. They don't understand what I'm doing. So I'm going to have a major fight on my hands. But that was purpose. To me, I had energy about it. And I'm like, okay, going, doing things. I feel a little glimpse of that now that I'm starting this up again. I went to see Karen. I kind of got stuff. I got things. I'm designing. I'm fun, and Parth is pushing. So I'm getting a little bit of that. But I think I need to not, again, have my full focus of purpose on work, because I need to be thinking, okay, other than work, what other purpose do I have? I mean, my children are grown and gone. Mata Bansuriya, my heart, and maybe a little bit of purpose. And I do. I mean, see, I put my energy behind that. Do I want to come to Canada every 5 seconds? Maybe not, but I will. I need to, because I want to be a part of their life. And it's not always easy to do that. But I make myself, I'm just, it's a thing. It's wonderful and it's lovely. But on the other hand, it's still going away from home. It's all these other things. But
Actually, I would use that as a metric. Is what's worth leaving the kitchen messy for? Like what is worth saying? You know what? I'd rather do this, and if the kitchen's a little messy, I'm too busy, right? And that's part of the problem is people get to the point where they're not too busy for trivialities, and then they get caught up with trivialities.
This is why this time
there's a term.
Being in Canada was, although I had this incident, but it was more purposeful for me because I bonded with Mataba over her assignments, the finance assignment and the science assignments. So, other than that, the thing is, one of the difficulties is I'm so used to doing stuff, like there's nothing to do for me over there, and that even those small things, not having those small things to do, you lose complete sense of purpose sitting around.
Yeah, and what I was going to say too,
and I think seeking positivity. Like, sorry to interrupt, Sarah, but like we have such a funny idea that just like the gym, right? Like that purpose will be this empowering thing, and we'll feel so good, and it's the feeling good. It's no, fighting is a purpose. Purpose can be very negative emotionally, right? It's no, I'm going to engage in this conflict with my family because I'm a part of this, and because I want to say these things, and I think this is important. Now, I think there are rules for healthy conflict. That's a separate question, but it can be a very negative emotional state, right? And it's not about seeking positivity that cuts you off from purpose, actually, right? Because then the minute you're in a fight, you're like, well, I don't want to do this. And then you don't get the purpose, because purpose, you have to be all in. Like it's the good and the bad, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And I have two things to say about that. I feel like, Mom, what I hear from you, like, even as you do move toward things that feel purposeful for you, I hear a reluctance to jump in. Why am I getting myself into this? It's like, because you want to, because I feel like it's almost like you're so used to going for the low hanging fruit that when it's not low hanging fruit, you're like, do I want this? And I think I don't I don't think you have to worry about that. I think you should feel empowered to get yourself entangled in things. I think you're right. It doesn't always have to be work. I don't think it's healthy. Like even I definitely struggle with that myself. And for me, like the learning the proper, like the tajweed and the Quran pronunciation is for me, that's my purposeful thing that is just for myself. Like it's not raising my kids and it's not being a part of a family unit. It's literally just, I want to be good at this. And it's the first thing I thought of when you said, like, if you were disabled, what would still motivate you? If you couldn't see, if you couldn't hear, like, what would you do? I would read the Quran and I would work really hard to keep improving at it because I would still be able to do that, or I would push myself to be able to do that.
Sorry, what is that?
Circumstances,
Read
reading the Quran like beautifully, right, and properly with like proper tajweed. And so I think it's important for you to find things outside of work that feel like that for you, and then not feel shy about diving into them, and not feel like, why am I getting myself into this, or do I really want to take this on, or second guessing yourself. Like just do it. Like, if that's like, if your first answer when Herman and Wallace calls is yes, like that's your gut saying yes, then let your gut say yes. And like,
well, actually, my gut was saying no because I had not been teaching for a long time, but I know I can, and that I know I'm going to have to prepare. So it's just, I'm comfortable,
That's why
and
guts
I said
are not trustworthy.
yes.
That's what I always say.
And I just said yes.
Yeah,
because I'm like,
yeah. So I guess
just to say, okay, I'm going to do it, and how
yeah.
I think that question, why am I doing this, comes up when you're confronted with discomfort. Right. And I think that's naturally the frame. And yeah, you have to have an answer for that moment, right? And no matter how ridiculous that answer is, like you need to figure out how I'm going to meet that moment when it is uncomfortable, when it's not pleasant, when I'm having a fight with the person who's setting up the presentation, or you involved in politics of all the, but nothing, there's no bullshit free job in the world, right? There's no bullshit free purpose in the world. And so if your qualification is like, oh no, I want purpose, but no bullshit, that doesn't exist.
What was the second thing you were going to say,
right?
Sari?
So
yeah,
you have to bite.
Yeah. So the second thing I was going to say is, like, when I brought up the example of Alice, to me, like, part of the struggle with her story is that, to me, she seemed like someone who was she didn't have a very purpose-driven life, except that, like, it seems like Zane said, like, her purpose was to just be Alice in her home and to putter around her home and to watch The Price is Right at 11 o'clock and then make herself a sandwich. And that habit almost was like taking care of the house in what little way she did, going to the groceries, like that was her purpose. But you can see how that purpose didn't serve her when she wasn't able to do that anymore. It's not the kind of thing that you can transfer into another circumstance. So when you become too disabled to be able to do those things, if you don't have any other purpose, that's partly why you can see her not adjusting very well to nursing home life, right? Versus the what was his name? Frank? No, Felix. Yeah. The geriatric specialist was like, he knew, he had a very robust understanding of what the end can look like, but also he continued to be purpose-driven in a different environment. And so my concern with you, Pa, is that, like, the way you felt in Canada, I feel like is indicative of the extent to which your purpose is really driven by daily life around the house, that you can putter, that you can fix things, that you can do this and do that. And in Canada, there isn't that for you to do. And so it feels like you're at loose ends. But then the question is, like, how are you going to transfer that down the line? And what are you sort of doing on a daily basis today to sort of move toward a purpose-driven life that is more transferable to different spaces and different levels of ability?
Canada, with my time in Soraya and helping transfer what lessons I have learned from life to them. Because with y'all, I didn't have that much time or whatever obstacles were. But I do now.
No, I'm not saying, obviously. Like,
and Sari's kind of a failed vessel in general of receiving knowledge. So that's...
No, I obviously, like, in terms of, like, the purpose of you being here in Canada, that's a different question, whether that was a successful trip or not. But I'm talking about life purpose, right? Like I think one of the reasons mom does well in Canada and she likes being in Canada is because she's here for us. Obviously, that's the primary reason she's coming here. But she has all of these other things that she likes to work on while she's here, and that keep her motivated, keep her going, so that when the kids are busy or I'm not around or whatever, like she's not
Wait
just
till
like,
they
oh,
come
I'm
back.
gonna waste time or like get through the day, but like she's excited to work on those things even when we're not around, right? And so I think it might be a good idea to start sort of developing those things for yourself, or we should all be thinking about doing those things that like
Yep.
that they keep us going. That it's like for me, it's like the first thing that I want to do when in the magic instance when no one else is in the house, like that happens like once every 4 months. I'm in the house by myself, and it's like, okay, I have all this time, like I could do so many different things. What is the one thing that I want to do in this, with absolute quiet and absolute freedom, nobody telling me to do anything? What is the thing that I
Cheetos.
want to do that's just for myself? And I feel like we all need to sort of develop that
that's a
and
good
hone
point.
that. Yeah.
And in that regard, Pappy, just going back to the previous point, I do think there is a challenge, and one of the issues I have with the existentialists and with now the modern version of the existentialist is the materialist atheist view, is it leads very quickly to nihilism. Like you end up in a very tough spot in terms of, well, what are you going to do? And it is inevitably a bit hypocritical in some sense. And that's something that's not talked about enough. Even if it's true, if you talk to the most Christopher Hitchens, the most materialist atheist person in the world, you say, well, why are you talking about this? Well, people should believe this in order to... No. Nobody can... There's no should. Nobody can believe anything other than what they believe. The reason you're doing this is because the atoms in your body are playing out the Big Bang. And there's nothing, according to your own view, there is nothing more to it than that, right? So don't tell me why you're doing anything. Don't tell me you should, shouldn't. Don't. All those words have to exit your vocabulary, and you can't. You can't function in life that way. And so when you realize that a viewpoint is fundamentally unlivable, it's an unlivable worldview, then you have to find a livable worldview. And that's maybe an additional requirement than... I mean, nobody knows the truth with a capital T, right? But you want something that's potentially true, at least, right? Something that you can at least... You don't want to believe something you sort of believe is not true. That's a bit difficult, right? Also, it has to be livable. It's one of those things. If you end up where the only thing you think could be true is an unlivable worldview where you're fundamentally hypocritical to it every time somebody says, well, do you want coffee or tea? Well, like literally, you can't live in a worldview that
It's a
forces
good
you to
point
be a
because
hypocrite at that level.
when
Right?
I'm in Canada and I don't have things to do to put around, then I'm forced to confront my sense of being. I'm there. I'm existing. Right. There's nothing to justify my existence. The whole question of the absurdity of life is just
Yep.
sitting in the room with me.
Yep.
You know? So that's uncomfortable, right? I mean, what do you do then?
Be uncomfortable.
Sure. Well, I mean, there is an answer to that, and that kind of is the point we're getting at. Is that choosing to find a purpose, choosing something that resonates with how you fit with the world, and doing that, right? It is.
I mean, our lives, like any life, has life lessons, and connecting with this book, one of the major lessons, even in chapter 3, is the skilled nursing facility, the cost of it, and all that. So the cost and the financial security or insecurity is a big part of it, and it drives immigrants. Is a driving force for immigrants. Like the reason we are here, two major things happen. Okay,
Totally.
one is the absence of jobs in Pakistan. Okay, even for a privileged family like mine, no jobs. Number two, the change in immigration policy in the U.S. Those two events combined to have me end up over here, right? So there's sometimes there are world events that are not in your control that you only appreciate in hindsight, but that act on your life to move you in a certain direction.
I actually would make that a direct analogy. Here's is health and money are fundamentally They work the same. It's a relatively similar concept, except we don't have tokenization of health. Money is tokenized, right? What money is tokenized debt in some sense. The notion of, or tokenized value is probably a better way to put it, right? But health, we don't have a tokenization, but it functions the same way. As you talk about security, having a high VO2 max and working to maximize that's more security from a nursing home than you can than money even, right? Same for strength. Being able to do squat with whatever, half your body weight or whatever the deal is, that's going to give you a lot more security than
right. And going
financial.
along the same analogy, like
Right.
just because you just like you cannot build muscle mass immediately just when you need it. It takes time. Same
Mm-hmm.
with a safety nest for money. You
Sure.
can't just do it at that moment. You have to work at it daily. Put away a coffee worth of money, an index fund. Each day you're not going to hurt so much, and after all you need is time. That's the only thing you need in a capitalist society.
But sure, but that brings up the question, and then what? And then you're sitting on, and I mean, then you're sitting on this
So-
pile of money.
Okay,
For-
so
to
the presence of money
to what
does
end?
not guarantee happiness. In fact, it may not. I mean, we're sure of that. But the absence of money definitely is a detriment towards happiness. Not having it when you need it is a problem.
I don't agree. I don't disagree with that on average, at the very least, right? I think there are certainly exceptions, right, as there are with anything. But I don't disagree with that on average. But it also misses the point in that the pursuit of security is a fundamentally fear-based goal, and thus cannot lead to purpose. And so you're still missing the answer.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, cool,
money,
fine,
you
security
know,
or getting to
money
the point
and
of
what do y'all
security
say?
is
Money
fine, but
is not the answer. No, absolutely, yeah. For the sake
Right.
of money, yeah.
and that's kind of the point. Is it's to do. I mean, money.
For travel.
Money is only okay if nobody accepts your money. If you're collecting seashells as money, right? It has no value because nobody will accept it because you can't do anything with the money, right? Money only has value insofar as it gives you the capacity to do something with it. But
No,
that
so
raises the question of what do you want to do?
We were able to afford. You wanted to go to Italy. We were able to let you go to Italy, pay for your ticket. Sarah wants to go to Cambridge at
Sure.
12 or 13. She was able to go because we could pay for the ticket and stuff, right? So I'm saying,
Sure,
like,
but-
okay,
And so family is a purpose, right? That's my point, is that then money has value. Without the family, then if we didn't have kids,
no, that's true.
the money could not have had that
Yeah,
purpose.
Maybe two things can be true at the same time.
And so
No, definitely you
What
have
can
to,
it-
you can earn a living. I mean, that's not the issue, but it's for us at this age, it's beyond that. I mean, in our 20s, I mean, that's the struggle. I mean, for me, it has just been one struggle. And it's fine. I mean, I had the bandwidth and the training to do that. In the 70s, you look back and you think, why am I here? I asked to God, why am I here? It's because, but I had
and he does not
great
answer.
opportunities and they came my way and I accept the challenge, and all the way from my childhood, bad things happened, good things happened. It was fine, but I can't look back. I want to know what I should do now, because sometimes I have been wallowing a bit lately, just sort of like wallowing, just everything caught up with me, and I kind of felt like I just need like 10 antidepressant drugs and just be done with my life. But it's a temporary feeling, and I know that. I just
Actually, that's a great thread to pull at a little bit, because I think that depression
Yes.
ran through the book. All 3 chapters, that topic came up. One of my favorite models of depression, I talk about this a lot, is if you take a rat in a cage, right, and it has food and water and it's doing its rat things and it's being a rat, right? Then if you electrify half the cage so that it's getting shocked anytime, it'll hop and jump, and it'll arrive and land on the other half of the cage where it's not electrified, and it'll carry about its rat life, right? Now, if you add a red light where the red light comes on and then a second later it's electrified, the rat will learn to hop over to that side of the cage. It'll be fine, right? If, on the other hand, you electrify the whole cage where there's no option for the rat to not get shocked, it'll hop, and at some point it just huddles in a corner and just takes it. And after that point, the rat will become depressed, because the world doesn't make sense and it feels helpless to affect anything, right? And so the notion of helplessness and inefficacy and things not making sense are deeply linked, I think, to the notion of depression. And that then we're right back at purpose, where it's like, well, what sense do your actions make? None if they're not accomplishing, if they're not headed somewhere, then they don't make any sense. Like that there's no way to make a, I mean, hey, okay, I wake up, okay, I have $1 billion. I wake up in the morning, I make my coffee, I have my whatever, and then whatever, I sit and stare at the wall, and then I go to bed, and then I do it again the next day. Well, having the $1 billion doesn't help me because I'm literally,
I get it.
my
I
life makes no
totally,
sense.
and I'm self-aware
It
enough
has
to
no
know
meaning.
that this is a temporary thing. I did. You're very right about the helplessness. I just kind of felt like there's nothing I can do here to make things better for him too. And I have to stop. I know this. I have to stop taking responsibility for, oh, Zane's unhappy, what can I do? Oh, Sari's having this problem, what can I do? My husband's having this problem, what can I do? You know what? Yeah, everybody's grown up. They need to take care of their own hassles. I need to be taking care of my hassles. But
I'm an unhappy person, and Sari's just a problematic person. So there's not fixing in either of those.
Bring it back to the book.
Just,
on page 28, at the bottom he says that when our bodies fail to live up to this fantasy, we feel as if we somehow have something to apologize for. And I bring that because I feel very much like that. I feel like I need to apologize for being ill or falling ill or not being well enough to do something.
It's challenging. Actually, I want to go back to briefly what you said is helpless to make things better requires that the reason you're helpless is you don't have a definition of better, or at the very least you don't have a definition of better that lies within the scope of reality, right? That's the other thing, is that I think people get caught up in the notion of like, oh, like, well, I wish I had wings. Wait, okay, like that's not a purpose. There's no purpose in wishing you had wings. There's purpose in trying to fly. How can I build a plane? But if you're looking for magic,
but then that's exactly what leads to the depression, right? Is because you are looking for some solution to this. Yep. It's this and this and this, and I am working on it. That's the best. I love that about myself, is that I know I'm wallowing, and then I say, okay, I'm going to give you 2 days to wallow. Just wallow and just hit your low and wallow all you want. But third day, you're going to wake up and say, okay, no more wallowing. I need to have some idea about where I'm headed next. And I think I do feel better. I feel better this past 10 days than I've had literally in the past 6 weeks. It's been incredibly awful 6 weeks. And especially when I stop wanting to engage with social activities, then I know I've hit I don't want to go to Mahjong. You don't want to go to Mahjong? Like, what the heck is that all about? And I make myself go, because it's that same thing, Amal and Iman, right? You do your action, the joy will come. So I have to do the action when I'm wallowing like that. I do the action that I don't want to do, because the emotion, the positivity will come after that.
I always think about this in terms of maintaining my right to complain. If you're not doing the thing, then you don't have the right to complain, right? But I'm single, right? But if I don't go to the speed dating thing, then I don't have the right to complain, because you didn't do the thing. But this way, at least I can still complain, and I have every right to complain because I've done all the things. That's really maintaining the right to complain is a really powerful purpose, I think.
You have rights all the time.
What do you mean?
No, he has the right to complain regardless.
Yeah, he does. That's true.
To complain.
You earned it.
Yeah. No, in the family, then they tell me, well, did you do the thing or not? And if you didn't do the thing, then I don't want to hear it.
Not recently.
One of the things that, one of the things that we talk about, okay, well, we won't go to a nursing facility. We'll hire somebody like Masha.
Masha.
Yeah, Masha.
He talks about, okay, when you have, and I felt that because I was home, right?
Yes, the
person is hanging around, and now you got one person. So for us, I don't know. Again, we don't know.
We are okay. We pretty proactive. we doing the things we need to do, even though, okay, so we're transferring titles, we're thinking about house and cars, and okay, what can we do to make this as smooth as possible? Who knows how we want to be buried, we're taking care of the things that are action items that are doable. Then there's all this fuzzy wuzzy stuff that, okay, what happens if we can't take care of ourselves? What happens this? What happens that? And that also, this is why we're having this conversation, is what are you thinking is going to happen? I mean, lay out a scenario, okay? I'm disabled, I can't do anything. Now, I have a fractured hip, okay? Hopefully that's temporary, but okay, now what? I mean, it's something to like,
Now what?
it's a struggle, right? I mean,
And I think even in this book, and that's one of the things that I struggle with and we haven't finished it, obviously, we'll see where he goes with it, but so much of the time we fixate on the external aspects of that. Well, okay, if you fracture your hip, then we'll have to get a wheelchair. Then we have to make sure the house is wheelchair accessible. Then we have to have a caretaker. And why would you bother doing it internally? Why would you not just give up and die? That's the real question. Answer that first. Then we'll figure out the practicalities, because so much of the practicalities will be determined by your answer. Right? And that's the uncomfortable question that really we're still, by talking even about the practicalities, we're still avoiding that uncomfortable question, is why should you bother not dying?
Die till Dad is still here. I genuinely don't think he's, I am,
No, I mean,
that's my
okay,
purpose,
I mean,
one of my purpose. I just don't think he's going to, I mean, I may be wrong, but I don't think he's just going to survive well without me. He'll survive, but he won't survive well without me. I'm infusion of everything in here.
Great. And so, sure, taking care of a partner can be a great purpose, right? I think that's fine. As at least my River Rock history has told me that people need a minimum of 3. Without 3, like one is confinement, 2 is a dilemma, and 3 is freedom, right? And so you need a minimum of 3 sets of purpose. Like what? Like you need 3 answers to that question
also,
of why not to give up and die.
My concern too with the purpose of taking care of a partner is like, does that feel like purpose? Are you taking that on with that mindset, the way that Felix was with his wife in the book? Like it was like a crazy burden, like just like things just kept getting so bad. And one of the takeaways from my book was like how bad things can be. Like I feel like I don't spend enough time sitting with that. It's like I think of like, oh yeah, maybe you need a walker, or like, but like you're gonna suddenly go blind and deaf. Like I don't think about that level of disability often. But even still, like he was, even with the extreme level of his wife's disability, it's at least from the way Gawande puts it, is like they still gained so much from each other's company, and their favorite part of the day was snuggling up together and cuddling and whatever they were able to exchange of togetherness that was still so meaningful to them, that the burden of taking care of his wife, it was a burden. It's no one's saying it wasn't hard, but it felt like there was purpose behind it. And my concern is that I'm not sure I feel like my concern with you, Mom, is that like your perception of yourself is someone that like you're always like, oh, I do the needful, and that's not purpose. that's bullshit. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so like being like, I think
it's the difference between an obligation for a purpose versus an obligation with resentment.
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at, right? And so my worry is, are you resentful of having to take care of a partner? And you both take care of each other, so it's obviously it's not just you, right? Like you both do things for each other. But are you doing that with resentment, with annoyance? Or are you like, no, like our purpose in growing old together is to take care of each other and to like there has to be something that still sustains you about being together. And obviously there must be, but like I worry about the resentment piece, because it's not Bella's fault when she goes deaf and blind. She didn't ask for that. She didn't like not take care of herself properly, and that's why Sometimes,
Well, we don't know
like,
that.
we don't know, but even still, like when you get older, things
I'm
like
just
things are
kidding.
going to happen. You're going to get sick, and that's no one's fault. So you can't be like, why is this person sick? Like, how dare they? If that's your response to it, or your response to it is like, now this is my problem. Those aren't healthy responses to your partner getting old, right? And so I feel like that either that is a function of like shifting your mindset to thinking about caring for your partner as part of your purpose, as part of what gets you up in the morning. But if it's not, then you also have to accept that and have 3 other purposes that keep you going so that you don't feel resentful of this other thing that you have to do.
Yeah, and maybe that's the conversation because I have struggled with this. And honestly, I've been such a workhorse all my life, both on the job and off the job. I mean, I was a doer. I was a human doer. That's what I did. I went to work. I did my thing. I came home. I did my thing. I was like, okay, do the laundry, take care of the guys, drive the take care of me, blah, 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 blah. It just kept on. The list was every day a checklist. And now that I don't have that, I'm like, what is going to excite me and what is going to get me, going every day? So that, then you do become resentful because you just kind of feel like this is not a life. This is not just going from one.
And that's part of what the book is showing it could be.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain, it may not be for you, but there is a certain person, a certain type of person for whom that is a life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that also gets me back to this notion of denial and the notion of I'm a good driver. At what point do we say like, hey, yeah, you know what? Like we can't travel the way we used to. Like, and that's not, we have to take a more, the statistics of that type of travel have changed, right? It's no longer that, hey, we go on this trip and there's a 99% chance we're going to get, or 99% of the days are going to be us going around and having a good, it's no. Okay. Now we're down to 60% of the time or 40% of the time. Not that we don't take the trip, but we just know ahead of time that the statistics are that only 40% of those days are going to be the ones that we're
And
after.
that's no one's
and
fault.
we're going to find purpose.
That's just the reality of the situation. And you're not resenting that, we should be doing 99% of the things, but that you are comfortably and happily and with purpose inhabiting the 60% of the time that you're
correct me if
doing
I'm
things.
wrong, that
And
we know you're very suggestible, but you also are very susceptible to the theory of social comparisons. All our 8-pack are doing these trips to Croatia and this and that, and they're going and we go somewhere and I get diarrhea or something. So, like, okay.
And I think that's part of what Zane's saying about the money too, is like, you have the money, what are you doing with it? And I feel like what you're seeing is a lot of people choosing to travel with their money. And so it feels like a pat answer. It feels like luxurious. It feels like it's something that's relaxing. It feels like something that you earn. Like it's very much part of our social culture too, like that people earn money and then what you do with that is you go on these like over the top vacations where you relax and everything's Instagrammable and you know what I mean? Like I feel like it's become part of a thing that people of the leisure class do. And again, and I've said this to Mom, and I'll say it again, like you have to ask yourself, is that actually what you want to do? And even if it is what you want to do, is that actually what it's going to look like for you? Like, is that like travel? By all means travel, but then be realistic about what that is going to look like for you. It's not going to look the same as what it looks like for other people. And that you can't say that that's a missed opportunity. And I guess that's the other thing is like, where I'm looking also at the difference between you guys and my in-laws who have absolutely no desire to travel. Like Babaji is like low-key pissed at Gideon for going to Europe. He's like, what? There's nothing even over there.
There's nothing over
going
there?
to Europe.
Oh, yeah.
She needs to stay here and work. That's what you're supposed to do when you're young. Like you're supposed to work as hard as you can when you're young and make a lot of money. And then when you're on your own 2 feet, then you just keep working. Like
he's got it right. Well, I mean, I think that's he's got that spirit.
Attitude to life, because someone whose life's motto is "Zindagi na matlab kam karna," the purpose of life is to work, right? Has a very different approach to like he, contrary to probably every other person his age, is going to his doctor and going like, why don't I ever feel tired? Like I keep working and I'm never exhausted. Like I just want to be exhausted. You know? The doctor's like, this is not a medical company. I can't help you. Like he's like, at some point, he literally is like bande no thakna chahiye. Like a person should get tired. You know? Like what's wrong with me?
You need to study him and find his secret.
But like I also feel like, well, this is the thing, right? He's totally not appreciating that this is actually like remarkable. But also like someone whose attitude toward life is having no expectation of leisure ever is ironically like, I feel like it's better prepared them for this stage because they've worked insanely hard as well their whole lives, and physical jobs and multiple jobs, and been through a lot of hardship. But there isn't that sense of like, and now I've earned my dues and I just should be able to sit around and eat bonbons. Like there's a sense, definitely with Dodby, there's like, she can't do as much as she used to, but she gets that like you still have to keep doing things and you don't have the right to just like, you don't actually earn leisure. That's not what life is. And so in a way that I feel like is a better attitude for them in old age, because they're always going to be purpose driven, even if that purpose is I have this role in the family and I have to always, like, whether I'm sick, whether I'm tired, I have to get up and I have to make roti. You know what I mean? And like there isn't resentment about that. That is just life. And so what gets you up in the morning is I have to make roti for the family and I have to do it 3 times a day. Like, and there's just that is the reality of the situation, and it doesn't matter how I feel about it. So I'm not going to have feelings about it. That's just what it is. I feel like that is almost partly why they have less angst, I guess, about getting older.
For me.
They're
And so
very
I almost
physically
feel like this-
active. And I mean, I think that we, again, gave into that with a lot of ease. Like,
Physically, yeah.
you like to be playing, well, we can't, then there are ways to do things, but we just sort of like, that's too much trouble. I mean, and I think that's the thing, is to say, yes, it's trouble, and we're going to embrace the trouble. You know, I mean, and
The other thing that occurs to me on some level is that I see this in people my age and younger, even, who in entrepreneurship in some sense, because most people are used to being employed, right? Where there's a set of external intentions and consequences if you don't do that. And then it's hard to figure out, well, are you going to go to and that's why people don't work out. That's another example of that, right? Is, well, nobody's telling you. Nobody's going to fire you. There's no immediate consequence. It's a vague, well, when I'm 70, I may not be as fit as whatever. And it feels less real, right? Because it's so far away. And yeah, and I think that notion of just like, well, the entrepreneur's dilemma is, well, you have to do it. Like, you're the boss telling yourself that if you don't do these things, they won't get done. And it's not going to go anywhere. So no, there's no deadline. There's no time other than what you impose on yourself. And similarly with working out, similarly with after retirement, it's like, well, cool. You want to start telling stories. You want to start podcasts. You want to start writing a book. Well, how are you creating that deadline for yourself? How are you creating the impulse to do like even the notion of like, okay, well, I wrote a book. Well, do you have to rewrite it? How good does it have to be? Well, you're also the boss. You're also the one who determines whether it needs a rewrite or a redraft. Like, all of these things are just like, well, at every level, the self-direction actually becomes a bit of a challenge.
I've told you that I struggle with
somewhere in our awareness level, education level, whatever, we got to where we are. I don't think we are capable of not having angst. Angst comes along with the territory.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, nor should you be. I don't know why. Yeah,
no,
nor should you.
No, I wasn't saying that. Like, it's. like my in-laws are never going to be motivated by getting up in the morning and writing a book. You know what I mean? Like it's always going to be very
New goal.
tangible. Like, and in fact, it's partly why they don't have the same struggle, because all of the things that they're motivated by are immediate, time sensitive, urgent things. You know what I mean? Like I have to get the kids to school, to pick up the kids. I have
the
to,
yard has to be
even if it's like
planted
the
right
garden,
now.
right? Like you plant on May long weekend, and then you go in the morning and you water the plants at 10 a.m. And then at 9:30 p.m. when it gets cooler, you water them again. And it's very like, everything is very regimented, right? And so there isn't like, now I need to sit down and like really make myself do this thing that's a long-term goal. Like that's not what it is, right? But your purpose is something bigger than that, that requires little bits of daily investment and daily work that nobody is holding you accountable to. Then
I'm saying it
I
from
guess in a way, there's almost angst that comes along with that too. Like writing a book is an angst-filled process. Like it's a horrible process, right? But you do it because you're motivated by that purpose. But the point is that you do it, and you have to make yourself do it. And there's no external structure that's going to make you do it either, right? So I think it's more just like, yeah, sure, as your class changes, as your level of education changes, as your interests and your backgrounds change, you're going to have different things that you're motivated by. But then you also have to have the stick to itness, or just the like, if nothing else, my in-laws are consistent, right? And partly that's a result of the types of things they have chosen to do on a daily basis. But partly, like Harjeet was joking, like he'll mess with them, and in the morning he'll be like, just go to the gym now. Well, you don't go to the gym in the morning, you go after lunch. Like, and there's no reason why that's the case. They're just sitting around doing like word searches in the morning. They're not like doing something really important
we
in
haven't
the
thought
morning.
about
They have to do
seeing
it
movies
later.
or
But
watching television.
they have this
This
very
is
set routine.
something you don't do. We haven't thought about
Huh?
watching a movie or watching television. I
Yeah,
cannot do it in the morning.
Yeah. Right.
sure.
Yeah. But equally the case that like if you were to be like, don't go to the gym today, they're like, no, you go to the gym. That's what you do in your day. So there maybe again they're used to these very shift work based jobs that are very like on this time you do this, and then you know what I mean. So they were raised in an army family, so from the day. But I think what I've heard moms say about it is like, oh, in the convent, your whole day was regimented. So it's almost like when you don't have those kinds of structures, it's hard to impose them yourself. But I feel like
this is
I've picked on that
it's
in the
also
book
important
also
in
because
terms
she
of like
talks about
giving that.
the nursing home, how everything is decided for
yeah,
her,
and yeah.
and that's
Yes,
how
right.
boarding school was for us. There was no,
Right. So there's like an allergy to
but
that
I
kind of
hated
like
it. That,
rigidness
I
being
could have.
imposed. Yeah, but then you have to be
So
able to
I
impose
had
your own
structure
rigidness,
all the way up until
right?
I
And you have
retired,
to have
really,
that
because
stick-to-itiveness.
there was always a to-do list, always. I mean, I
Yeah.
was raising my children, and you know how that is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always something, and your day is planned. This one needs that. This one needs that. This one needs to go here. That one makes the dinner. All that. And then I retired, and I just felt like I literally just I just didn't know what I was supposed to do. Because then somebody told me at 8 o'clock, go to work, at 10 o'clock, do this, at 12 o'clock, that, at 4 o'clock, this. And I just didn't have that. So I'm trying to really do that. And I think that's part of it is like, okay, at least Thursdays I'm regimented. I have to go to work, and then I'm doing it in small bits, but I'm trying to create not that kind of a schedule, but something to where the gym is important, the working out is important, the making it everything accessible, and just say, okay, the weight should be staring you in the face when you're watching TV, so that you might watch TV while you're picking up the weights and doing it at the same time, even if it's boring to do it. Which is
And Siri, I just want to jump in on what you said with your in-laws, and then I also always compare Ummi versus Abba in some sense, right? In that regimented nature and living very much in the immediate present, I think has benefits for early old age and detriments in later old age. In that, if one of them becomes disabled, what are they going to do? They can't work. Now the whole thing falls apart because there's no inner options, right? You can still even if you can, okay, at least if you can speak, you can still tell stories, you can still write a book, you can still, I mean, especially with today's technology, you can still do a lot of things.
Yeah.
Like, even if you can't type, you can verbally dictate a book, right? Like, there's a lot of things you could do. But if you're very much in that present, concrete, external, physical world, then those options are cut off, and there's a bit of danger there for the future. Even though in the immediate present, there's probably
I did
benefits.
talk to them actually,
right?
to your
And
in-laws
so
about writing
for
the
and
book
Pappy, I
in
think
Punjabi. Yes, and dictate it, talk about it. It doesn't matter. You don't have to sit at a computer. That's not the only option. But you have so many stories to tell, which your grandchildren will never know of your life before you, well, even your early life in America, all of those. So I've been kind of pushing them a bit. Maybe it just needs to be that they're recording, because I don't think sitting and writing it, even in Punjabi, is just it's a huge undertaking to just sit and do that. But talking is easy, especially if there's a prompter, which is what Zain is telling me and Dad to do, was talk about it. Like, okay, so you remember when so that it becomes a conversation and it's easier to do, but we've got to set up the mic and set up something. There's some kind of setup to do that. But anyway, I think your in-laws are doing very well. But I think you hit the nail on the head a little bit about the whole Canada thing. I have purpose wherever I go, at least to some degree. I know what I'm doing. And his purpose is not transportable, even though I think it is. If you're writing a book here and you're doing podcasts here, you can do that there. We have a computer there. He was doing Wall Street over there for a couple of hours every morning anyway. But then there was the rest of the day to deal with. And I was gone. I used to go pick up the kids, drop the kids. I'm busy. And then I would take them across to the big house and sit with them for lunch. I mean, I had things to do, right? But he did not embrace that. And I think he needs to take that whole book thing with him. Like, okay, I'm in Canada. I can still go for a walk. I can still go do things. And then I can write my book in Canada. Even if there's not the puttering to do about fixing things all the time, then actually you can look at it positively, say, I don't have the puttering to do. So I have all this time to invest in really thinking about my book, because I don't have the daily hassles of looking after things. But I'll work on it. We'll have to see. But it's just, he really feels lost. And I think that's part of the whole, I don't know.
I think you both do, and I think that's in different ways. And I think that's kind of what I'm
I feel more lost here. I don't feel so
address
lost in Canada,
is if
because
we get
again,
that
I feel
fixed-
like I have things to do in the day. I have my assignments. And yeah. So
I agree.
And I guess too, like, I feel like, again, ironically, history repeating itself. Like, you love being in Houston, and rightfully so, for the family, but because typically what it means, like what for the family means in Houston is just getting together for fun events. It feels a little bit like me being like, when are we getting
Great
together?
point.
Constantly seeking the next social interaction, because there wasn't really much else to keep her going. Like, that was what she looked forward to. And so it was always like, okay, what's the next external input? What's the next external input? And here, like, because a big part of your time here is like not just fun, but okay, I need you to help, like, get the kids ready.
Yes.
And I need you to pick them up. And I need you, in a way, like, having obligation is also important, right?
It's more important, much more important than fun. Fun is trivial. Obligation is purpose.
Yeah. And I almost feel like when Pa's in Canada, like, if you were to take on some more of that obligation, even though it's not really an obligation, but if it's like, no, Mom and I will both go get the kids from school today, or it's my job to make sure Mothab has her homework after school. It's not just when Mothab has a relevant project, she'll come talk to me about it, but that, no, like, Mothab knows, and you know that after school, Mothab sits down with Baba, and Baba's her homework person. Like, actually having that structure to the day and having that obligation and being accountable to somebody, just as an example,
That's a good idea.
might actually be, and obviously not just for Canada, but like in any way that you can build in some sense of obligation.
I can definitely
It
latch on to
just
that.
gives a structure to the day, right?
yeah, no, I mean, and that's probably why I love it in Canada, is because I love having the obligation. I have things to do. There's
Yes.
a day, there's a purpose. And I don't always want to go. Trust me. I mean, I don't want to go at 3:00 and pick up the kids. But it's like, no, but there's no choice. I'm going. And it's my job. I go to there. I mean, I'm going to try to take on the 8 a.m. shift, but maybe not. But the 11 run, there and back, the 3 run there, absolutely. I mean, I that's my day. And then in the evening, we'll see what the deal is. But I was going to tell you to buy me those deck chairs that you get, the kind that you can actually put your legs up on, and then you can put the back, almost sleep on it. Because honestly, me and the kids don't fit on anything anymore. Like the plastic chair, and one or the other is always on my lap. And I feel like I need to do something about that. I love to sit outside and read, and they're always sitting in my lap, and they're falling off, but something's happening. So I'm like,
yeah, I want to get like a patio swing, but that's a different story. But speaking of obligation, I do have to go feed my children. I have to.
What? They need to eat?
I know. It's like the worst.
What luxurious life you're giving them.
I'm a very good mom, but I'm very bad at feeding my children.
So, okay, no, but I think this has been valuable. So should we just read the next 3 chapters and then kind of have this meet again? I think you should send this to Gawande and say, look what you do. Look what you do for us. So let's read the next 3 chapters, and maybe in a couple of weeks we can just set another date.